When Zhao Daong, who had just taken a hot bath, slipped into the bed and embraced me from behind, I was startled as he was still cuddling our little son who was asleep. Afraid that the child might wake up, I gently pushed away his hands resting on me and whispered, "Close the door." But before I could finish my sentence, my mother-in-law burst into the room, yelling at me, "You shameless little fox spirit. My son just came back, and you can't wait?" My son, who had just fallen asleep, was frightened by my mother-in-law's outburst and started crying. Ignoring the crying child, my mother-in-law pushed Zhao Daong, who was only wearing underwear, out of the room. Then, she lay down beside me. My name is Qin Shishir, born into a family that values sons over daughters. After graduating from high school, my mother forced me to work in a nearby factory screwing screws to help my brother find a wife. The factory's owner was acquainted with my parents, and every payday, my father would directly take the money from the boss. Whenever I asked my parents for money, they would say, "The factory provides food and accommodation, why do you need money?" Even when I pleaded for just 50 yuan to buy sanitary pads, my mother would say, "Isn't the factory providing toilet paper? Use that, it's enough. Girls like you are just wasting money." Since toilet paper easily falls apart when wet, I had to collect a few bottles every day after work to exchange for money. I envied the other girls who would buy clothes with their salary. The days of screwing screws at the factory were monotonous. Most girls quit after 2 or 3 months, but I persevered. One day, my parents came to the factory and bought me new clothes. Thinking they had become rich, my parents excitedly said, Sure, we found you a wealthy family." Before I could express my opinion, my parents hurriedly took me to the man's house. The man's house had 5 large tiled rooms. His parents scrutinized me like livestock, then handed my parents 100,000 yuan. My parents happily left with the money, leaving me and the man locked in a room. That night, the man nearly broke me to pieces. The next morning, the man's mother opened the door, satisfied to see me covered in bruises. It was then that I noticed the room and the man. I thought my parents hadn't lied. The man's family seemed wealthy, and the man was quite handsome. As I fantasized about a good future, a group of police officers came and took the man away. During dinner, the mother-in-law bluntly told me, "My son, Su Teng, committed a crime and got a 3-year sentence. Stay here peacefully. If you can get pregnant, it's even better. If not, we'll figure something out." So, I stayed. My mother-in-law was straightforward and didn't make things difficult for me. She even bought me new clothes. My father-in-law drove a big truck and was rarely home. 3 years passed quickly. I was feeding my son in the yard when Su Ting returned. Seeing Su Ting in front of me, I thought about living a good life with him. However, after Su Ting's return, he was rarely at home. 2 months later, a very attractive woman came to the house and said, "Make way quickly, I'm pregnant with Ting Ji's child." My mother-in-law grabbed a broom to chase the woman away, but Su Ting stood in front of her and said to me, "We never got married, you can leave. I don't like you." My mother-in-law, hearing Su Ting's words, gave me 100 yuan, saying, "You better leave now. Wait a few days until Su Ting loses interest in the new one, then you can come back." And so, Su Ting kicked me out of the house. When I returned to my parents' home, my sister-in-law didn't want me around, and my parents, with knowing eyes, asked me to stay away. In the end, with nowhere to go, I used the 100 yuan I had and took a bus to the city. After coming to the city, I found a restaurant that provided meals and accommodation and started working there. It was there that I met Zhao Daong. At that time, Zhao Daong was working as a small foreman on a nearby construction site, earning some money and even buying a house in the city. Whenever Zhao Daong came to eat, other waitresses in the restaurant would always strike up a conversation with him. Despite knowing their intentions, Zhao Daong, being a divorced man with a daughter, politely declined. I thought Zhao Daong was a good person, so one day, after he finished his meal, I approached him and shared my situation. I emphasized that I had been married before and had a child, assuring him that I would treat his daughter as my own if he didn't mind. Zhao Daong took out a cigarette and, after a puff, surprised me by saying, "Let's get married." So, I became Zhao Daong's wife. Worried that my parents would demand a hefty dowry and create complications for Zhao Daong, I concocted a story when I went home to get my household registration. I told my parents, "I'm going to work in South Korea, where the pay is high, but I need my household registration." Hearing the words, high pay, my parents happily handed over my household registration. I smoothly obtained a marriage certificate with Zhao Daong. Then, I arranged for a courier to send back my household registration. Zhao Daong is a good man, not only treating his daughter Tingting well but also being kind to me. I thought our family of 3 would live happily together, but 2 months into our marriage, his mother-in-law, carrying large bags, arrived from the countryside. As soon as she entered, she sat on the sofa in the living room and said, "I heard my son got married, so as a mother, I came to enjoy the blessings of having a daughter-in-law." Zhao Daong frowned and said, "Mom, didn't we agree on 3,000 yuan a month for you to stay in the village and farm? Why did you come here?" His mother immediately burst into tears, saying, "Come and see me. My unfilial son got married and forgot about his mother. I came from far away to take care of their family of 3, and he actually wants to drive me away." We lived in an old community with poor sound insulation, and the neighbors all knew Zhao Daong. Afraid of his mother's crying making us look bad and receiving criticism for being unfilial, I grabbed Zhao Daong and placed his mother's luggage in the guest room. His mother was dissatisfied with the guest room and tearfully said, "With my old arms and legs, I prefer to live in a big room. This room has poor ventilation, I want to stay in your room." Feeling helpless, Zhao Daong left with a casual, "Live where you want." Our home had 2 bedrooms and a living room. With his mother here, Tingting had to sleep with us. After patiently explaining and suggesting taking his mother shopping for clothes, she finally calmed down. After dinner, his mother suddenly said, "Let Tingting sleep with me. You 2 hurry up and give me a chubby grandson." Thinking his mother had come around, I was surprised. However, when we went to bed that night, right after Zhao Daong and I had some intimate time, his mother came in with a blanket, insisting on sleeping between us. Helpless, I had to spend the entire night huddled with Tingting under the blanket. Unable to tolerate his mother any longer, Zhao Daong, rather than asking her to leave, decided to move to the construction site. On the 3rd day of Zhao Daong staying at the construction site, I suddenly fainted. Colleagues rushed me to the hospital, and after an examination, it turned out that I was pregnant. Feeling sorry for me working hard at the restaurant, Zhao Daong suggested that I resign and stay at home during the pregnancy. His mother, however, kept saying, "When I was pregnant with Daong, I didn't pamper myself like you, always working in the fields." Zhao Daong told his mother, "My wife is carrying the grandson you've been hoping for. If you want this child to be born safely, go back to the countryside. Come back when my wife has finished her confinement. If you insist on staying here, I'll stop giving you money every month." His mother glared at Zhao Daong, dissatisfied, but remained silent. However, she didn't leave. Every day, she would order dishes at home and make me cook for her. Under the guise of caring for me, she made me do exercises, forcing me to go out and buy groceries even with my pregnant belly. If I came home a minute late, she would aggressively accuse me, saying, "Are you sneaking around behind my son's back? Look at your big belly, you never stop." Every time my mother-in-law insulted me, I would put the dishes and meat in the kitchen, turn on the range hood, and start cooking. In truth, I endured it not only for Zhao Daong but also because I felt sorry for my mother-in-law. When I married Zhao Daong, he told me about his mother's situation. In her youth, she was a proud and beautiful woman. In the 1970s, she and Zhao Daong's father had a love affair. After some sweet years of marriage, his father had an affair, which greatly affected his mother's mental state. Zhao Daong's ex-wife was his classmate, and they had a good relationship. Despite her parents' disapproval of their marriage, the 2 lovers still got married. Like me, his mother treated Zhao Daong's ex-wife poorly. Eventually, after giving birth to Tingting, Zhao Daong's ex-wife couldn't bear his mother's madness and suffered postpartum depression, leading to her suicide. In the blink of an eye, I gave birth to a son. It should have been a happy occasion, but on the day of my last prenatal checkup, I ran into my parents on the bus. My brother and sister-in-law had moved to the city and came to visit. Seeing my belly, my parents realized that I had lied about going abroad. They followed me to Zhao Daong's house, found out he was a subcontractor with some money, and my mother insisted on taking care of me during my postpartum recovery. She also demanded a hefty dowry of 400,000 yuan from Zhao Daong. This escalated into a police station incident, where we were criticized for family disputes and then allowed to leave. Unwilling to have my mother take care of me, Zhao Daong said, "Let her come. It will be easier for you during your postpartum recovery." I didn't understand Zhao Daong's intention, but during my postpartum recovery, I understood his thoughtful plan. On the first day my mother came, she clashed with my mother-in-law. Seeing that Zhao Daong had bought me supplements, including bird's nest, my mother stuffed some into her bag to take home for my sister-in-law. His mother saw it and immediately came out with a kitchen knife, pointing at my mother's neck, saying, "Take it out. This is what my son bought for my daughter-in-law." Shocked and scared, my mother packed up and went home that day. After my mother left, Zhao Daong took me to the postpartum care center we had booked in advance. Since learning about my marriage, my mother frequently called me asking for money. However, terrified by my mother-in-law, she dared not come to my house. Exploiting my mother's weakness, I would say every time, "Come and get it at home. The money is with my mother-in-law." Then, she would remain silent. However, without the money, my father and brother wouldn't give up. So, after some consideration, my father and brother came to our house to demand money. In front of my father and brother, my mother-in-law once again brandished a kitchen knife. Finally, after another trip to the police station, Zhao Daong showed the psychiatric evaluation report for his mother. The police didn't say much and let us go again. Since then, my parents have never troubled us again. Actually, my mother-in-law's condition fluctuates. When she is in a good mood, she gives me money and even took out her savings to help us buy a bigger house. However, she insists on not letting us close the door. When we are intimate, she might suddenly open the door and lie down between us. But I dare not divorce. Because Zhao Daong is good to me, Tingting is obedient and sensible. Now, I am pregnant with Zhao Daong's child. More importantly, with my mother-in-law around, my parents dare not come to ask for money. Thinking about this, I sighed as I looked at my mother-in-law snoring beside me. Perhaps, this is life. Happiness comes with a bit of regret to make it perfect.